Our story this week is from Parker McCoy, who you'll find on Substack. And here is Like, Comment, and Share. Isaac Close checked his phone. He grinned at the message. Then he forced his face back to normal. A whole smile took over his face anyway. He gave a hearty laugh and sent a message back. Then he slipped the phone into his pocket and entered Winky's Tavern. The corner booth table sat empty, aside from a few drops of spilled beer and some peanut shells. Isaac slid onto the gray leather seat and patted the table. The waitress emerged from the dark, hazy air and slapped a wet towel down. She wiped up the spilled beer and shells. Then she pulled her phone from her apron and checked it. Isaac said, "You're right on top of it, huh, Ramona?" Ramona kept her focus on the phone. "Usual crew, Isaac?" "Yes, ma'am. Not the usual evening, though." He took out his wallet and showed her his ID. You see, she pushed the ID away and stayed focused on her phone. Not one blink. "I'll have your tall Blue Moon and fried pickles right out." Ramona breezed away, carrying that sopping towel with her, leaving a slight watery trail behind her. Another patron passed by her and slipped a bit, but stumbled on about their way while staring holes into their own phone. Two guys sat at the table next to Isaac's large corner booth. They wore jackets and cargo pants, and lots of gray in their hair, or what hair was left. The place was still sparsely crowded, and so the slight buzz from the crowd did not drown out one word. The dreary lighting also kept the two guys from looking around for potential listeners, despite having used the word murder more than once in the short minute Isaac had sat down. Ramona dropped off his Blue Moon and vanished into the place's murkiness, still carrying that soggy towel. Isaac took a sip from the frosty mug and leaned his head back to the wooden booth wall behind him and listened. One jacket said, "I know. I saw the damnedest things in my time down there. Half of these things the public doesn't need to know about." Jacket number 2 said, "Come on now. You know I don't talk to anybody. I deserve to hear something gritty, something crazy, from a guy with first-hand knowledge. Doesn't being your friend have any benefits?" Jacket 1 coughed. "Excuse me?" "Oh, not like the sex stuff. You know what I mean. 30 years and you never tell me nothing interesting, even after you hand in your shield. Come on." What?" You get the drinks and I'll tell you a few things." "Damn, I knew I'd have to. Hell." "Okay." "You sure?" "Yeah, sure. Hold on. Hey, honey pie, give us 2 more. Yeah, I'm sure. The conversation's getting interesting. Okay, give us 2 more. Okay, yeah, okay. Now, tell me something good, or hell, tell me something bad." Jacket number 1 lowered his voice a trifle. "Okay, there was this." Jacket number 2 said, "Huh? Say it where I can hear it." "I thought you got your hearing aid fixed." "I don't wear those damn things. Come on." "Fine." Isaac bit his lip and kept his head turned away from them. "Give me something worth hearing, boys. On this day, everything is good." Jacket 1 said, "So, this murder, Vera Sprint?" Jacket 2 cleared his throat. It took him a while. Yeah. They found her in that parking lot over by the bridge." "She was in her car, parked on the bridge, actually, sideways, like she'd seen something that freaked her out, and she turned the wheel and just stopped." "She was stabbed to death, like 16 times?" "We think the killer stood in the road to scare her into stopping. It was early in the evening, but there was little traffic. Still, the place is always lit up. She probably saw him from a ways back." "You know these kids. She was on her phone and looked up at the last second." "The killer stabbed her once, actually, right in the chest. with something long, like a really long knife or maybe a sword. But the way it happened, it's like she was talking to them and they just did it. Well, if she stopped to keep from hitting him, wouldn't she notice him holding a long knife? You'd think so. Still, we released those details so the confession nuts would come on in. Jacket 2 chuckled. There's always some of those, I guess. 16 of them, actually. That's a laugh, huh? A shadow passed over Isaac. He jerked. The man sat across from him and stared at him. Not one blink. The man's stare broke. He said, "Look at you, fellow. Bored yet?" Isaac exhaled. Then he shook the guy's hand. "I was wondering if you guys were ever coming." The guy took out his phone and stared into it. "Yeah, man. I was running a little. Oh." He looked up from his phone into Ramona's eyes, who now waited by the table with a basket of fried pickles in her hand. She stared directly back into the guy's eyes. Ramona said, "Would you like a pint of swill, you sexy sop?" The guy took her hand in his own and kissed it, never breaking eye contact. It was on the level of that unblinking attention given when nothing else in the world matters at that time. There, in that single moment, Ramona's eyes lit up, and she slid the basket of pickles over to Isaac. The guy said, "Marry me, Ramona." She chuckled and drew the hand back. He said, "At least let me pay you alimony." She ruffled his hair. "Only if you're bad." "I'm bad all the time." She sauntered over to the next table. The buzz in the room grew. A band got set up at the stage up front. They dressed in funny green hats and wore funny red suits and long white beards. They announced that they'd be playing soon. Their name? Elfie Selfie. In keeping with that, they stood around the equipment and took several selfies. The others in the place took turns taking selfies with the band as well, even the new guy at Isaac's table. Isaac glanced over at the next table in between fried pickle bites. The two guys in jackets left. Isaac finished his Blue Moon. Ramona set another one down before he could ask. He grinned and took another cold swig. Ah, life is sweet. The guy returned with a selfie from the band and showed it to Isaac. Isaac said, "Nice, man. Hey, I've got to tell somebody about what happened to me earlier today. I was beneath an old oak tree in Clearview Park, and more of their regular crew arrived. The two young ladies chewed gum and gave hugs to each of them and then sat. The perfume cloud engulfed them. Isaac fought his urge to sneeze. The other guy crinkled his nose, but he stared straight at them while they spoke. The two chatted about the bar and the band, and an upcoming concert, and another upcoming concert, and some more upcoming things. The other friend joined shortly after. This lady gave no hugs and smirked at the other two ladies. She acknowledged Isaac and the guy, but she stared straight ahead at the band, which now played. She wasn't entranced by her phone, but by everything else, and possibly something else coursing through her system. Elfie Selfie played a string of ballads, mostly about virtual love. The crowd swayed and danced and held their phones up high. The electronic torches burned while swaying back and forth like a soft blue field of LSD. Isaac pulled his own phone back out and recorded a video of the swaying virtual circus and then sent it in a text message to a few folks. One of the folks at his table nudged him and said, "Elfie Selfie, Isaac, Elfie Selfie, don't you feel swelfie?" Isaac put his phone back in his pocket. Why do I do this? 2 hours trudged by while Elfie Selfie jammed to more ballads and the crowd took videos of them on their phones. Would all their friends watch their posted videos? Or did that matter next to the number of likes, comments, and shares they received? Did being here need to be shared with the virtual world? Or was Isaac just a stick in the mud? He nursed his second Blue Moon while numerous empty glasses covered the table. The others around him sent texts and took their own selfies and then got their checks. They'd need to get out of here and back home, where they could tally up the receipts from the special night of being seen by people they may never see again in reality. Oh, but what does it matter? The last lady to arrive returned from the restroom just as Elfie Selfie finished their last set. The whole table cheered and then dispersed for their own restroom visits. She sat on the edge of the booth. Ramona popped over and swiped up her tip money. The other lady smiled to her, and then she got her car keys out. She glanced over at Isaac. Isaac finished the last sip of his Blue Moon. Ramona watched him from afar. He blinked a few times and pointed to his glass. Ramona gave him a thumbs up, while somehow not looking at him. The other lady said, "Well, here we are again." Isaac stretched his arms. "Yes, indeed." "How you been, anyway?" She held her stare at Isaac. He waited. She didn't move. He said, "Well, to be honest, something amazing happened earlier today." "Yeah?" "I was beneath an old oak tree in Clearview Park and watching the sunset. I was really into it, like thinking about life. There's not enough of that these days. I do that all the time in class. Of course, that's probably why my GPA is in the toilet. But go on." "Sure, I was watching the sunset, and then..." The other members of the Friends group bounded back from the restroom and announced that the lady, i.e. the designated driver, needed to get a move on up out of here. They gave Isaac smiles and waves, and the lady gave him a little wave of her own, and they were all gone, along with most of the patrons. Isaac slumped. "Hey now." Ramona set his Blue Moon in front of him along with his check. "You're not getting out of your tab." "Of course." Isaac handed over his credit card and smiled at her. She took off and ran it and returned with the receipt and then was gone again, with a nice little wave. Isaac sunk again. He shook his head and worked his mouth muscles. Two people sat at a table about 10 feet away. The man's back was to him, but the woman faced him. She rubbernecked around the man and waved. He waved back. Oh, her. Isaac took a big swallow of Blue Moon and ambled over to their table. They stayed into their phones. He drew up a chair from a nearby table, taking his time and letting the chair scrape across the floors. Scrunk! The lady looked up from her phone and forced a smile. "Isaac, how have you been? Are you still working at the bookstore?" Isaac sat in the chair. "I am. Where are you working now?" She shrugged. "Oh, I needed a little time off. I think I'm going to work on my master's in psychology." The man stayed into his cell phone. The lady glanced from her own cell phone and back at Isaac a few times. Isaac said, "That's interesting. Something interesting happened to me today." She kept up the glancing routine. The man pumped his fist into the air. "Hell yes, my Bitcoin just shot up." The lady grabbed his hand and gasped. "Babe, that is so great." They leaned across the table and shared a kiss. Then they settled back into their glancing/phone routines. Isaac took a sip of his Blue Moon. Then he cleared his throat and said, "I killed Vera Sprint." The lady's head did not move. However, her eyeball crept away from the phone and swiveled around toward Isaac. The man blinked a few times and faced Isaac. "Not bad, but not enough." The lady's lips flapped together. She cackled and smacked Isaac's hand. "Oh, now stop it, Isaac." Then she looked at the man and shook her goofy face around. The man blinked a few times and smirked at his phone. Isaac chuckled into his Blue Moon. Barley bubbles abounded in the tall glass. Ramona stopped by with a check in hand. Isaac held up his credit card. "Another round, or is it too late?" Ramona pursed her lips and waited. The lady looked at the man. He shrugged and stayed inside his phone. Ramona frowned and went up to the point-of-sale machine and tapped the order in. Isaac gulped down the rest of the blue moon and let out a roaring burp. Burp! The lady fell back in laughter and covered her mouth. The man gave Isaac a grin of appreciation and maybe a hint of respect. Isaac lifted his glass and said, "I am patron. Hear me expel." The two laughed. Ramona returned with her check and Isaac's, along with the final round of drinks. The lady and the man took good swigs of their drinks. Then she poked Isaac. "Don't you ever get tired of being locked up in that bookstore, Isaac? You should have a girlfriend up here with you. You're too handsome and clever to be alone." The man glared at her from the phone. Isaac watched his glare. The man finally blinked and cut his eyes to Isaac. Isaac waited for him to prove his valiant knight spirit and curse him for putting such a thought into his lady's head. This is something, at least. The man wiped his nose and returned to his phone fixation. The lady sipped her drink and watched Isaac. Isaac said, "Let me tell you what happened to me earlier today." You found some quote in an old book that no one ever reads anymore? I know how you are. You always get excited about unexciting stuff. That's not true. But it is. Now listen, we need to get out of here. I'm telling you, Isaac, get yourself a girlfriend. You'll be happier. Another dead end. What is wrong with these? No, adjust. Isaac took a healthy swig and set the blue moon back down. Vera was driving down the road that night. I cut her off at the bridge. She had to turn the wheel and stop going sideways. She didn't know what was happening. The lady swallowed. Still, she glanced between Isaac and the man. The man did the same. Isaac said, "I'd been standing there on the bridge, holding a machete. It was still light out, barely. The street lights were buzzing. I was standing there with this huge weapon in my hand, and anyone should have seen me and my bad intentions. I was doing everything besides wearing a hockey mask. She really should have been paying attention. Everyone needs to watch their surroundings." The lady got out of her seat and headed toward the end of the bar, although the restrooms were on the opposite side. The man glanced from his phone to the window and back at the lady now and then. Isaac rotated the glass. I guess Vera liked to live in her own world, oblivious to the horrible things out there. Maybe she was distracted. Maybe she lived in a virtual world that told her everything would be okay, where everything was good and people really cared. The man stared straight ahead in the direction of the lady. Isaac shook his head. Vera smiled a little before. I think she thought it was some kind of prank. I told her what I would do. Well, I actually just said it with a look on my face. She wouldn't really look at me, though. She just glanced up and then turned her attention in 100 different directions. I plunged the machete into her chest. She gave out a little squeal, and then she just faded, looking at nothing. Or maybe the night sky, like she'd never seen such a thing. Sweat covered the man's face. He fidgeted like a cornered animal, even though he was free to get away. Isaac sipped his blue moon, and then he closed his eyes and took it all down. Gulp, gulp, gulp. He set the blue moon down and opened his eyes. The man was now gone, and blue lights bounced off the windows. The detectives entered the interrogation room. Isaac sat in a chair in the corner of the room by the white desk there. The blue moon buzz lingered, but was now dissipating. He smacked his lips a few times. The two guys looked about middle-aged and wore khakis and dress shirts. They even checked their phones, and then set them down on the table along with a few file folders. The one guy wore black-rimmed glasses, and the other guy had a lazy eyelid. They ran him through the normal routines, and then asked that he speak about his encounter with Vera Sprint. Isaac held up his index finger. The both of them watched and waited. He let out a small burp and then grinned. They did not grin back. He leaned forward and said, "I was beneath an old oak tree in Clearview Park and watching the sunset. I was really into it, like thinking about life. Glasses said, and this was on the night in question? Isaac held up the finger. My thoughts went into some dark places. I pictured my future, and it didn't look good. To be 37 and working at a bookstore with no prospects and a total refusal to work in some corporate bookstore where I might make enough to support a family, I could see myself falling into destitution and alone and on the street and perhaps killed in the night by nobody and dying as a nobody. Glasses leaned forward. What has this got to do with? Lazy Eye placed his hand on Glasses' arm and motioned for Isaac to continue by furrowing his off-kilter brows. Isaac said, "But then she came over. She touched my arm. We embraced. We kissed there beneath the oak tree in front of everybody. And she took my face in her hands and said, 'Happy birthday, Isaac.' I told her that she was the best birthday present, and I hope she didn't get me anything. But she couldn't resist giving me something." Glasses huffed. "Are you going to get to the point, to the bridge?" Lazy Eye silenced him again. Isaac said, "She said your present, Isaac, is me, my love. I love you, Isaac." Lazy Eye watched him. Glasses watched him. Isaac said, "She gave me the best birthday present. All of my dark future faded. I could see the light. Even though the sun disappeared behind the cloud skies, I could see the light." They sat there watching, with not one blink. Isaac said, "Ah, yes. There we are. Isn't that the best thing in the world? To know this beautiful woman will be there from here on out, and that life is no longer empty, and that every birthday from now on will be filled with light, the light of a great woman." Glasses and Lazy Eye watched him with nothing else in their own eyes but Isaac's own giddy reflection. Lazy's eyelid even fully opened like a blooming orchid. Isaac clenched his fists and shook them in the air. "Ah, now this is what life is about. I had to dig, but I got here. Thank you, gentlemen." Lazy Eyes swallowed. Glasses pushed his glasses up his nose. "Stop wasting our time, Isaac. Now tell us about Vera Sprint." Lazy Eyes blinked and crossed his arms. "That's right. Let's get to it." Isaac turned away from them and wore a little grin. It was a great, unblinking moment. "Isaac? Isaac, answer us. Isaac? Isaac?" Thanks for listening. I'm Chris Kepler, and I hope you enjoyed listening to these stories as much as I enjoyed narrating them. I'd love for more people to hear these wonderful stories, so please share and tell your friends.